Assalamu alaikum, Ms. Fatma. Thank you for joining us. We're very happy to have you today.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me. It's good to speak to you again.
On behalf of LACAS A-Levels, we would like to welcome you all to today's webinar. Let it be a tale, undoing complicity, redoing commitment. My name is Abbas Haider.
My name is Arfa Jawana.
And my name is Faris Jawad.
And collectively, we will be the moderators for today's conversation.
At LACAS, we believe that education is not only about what happens inside the classroom, but also about who we, as young people, learn to engage with the world around us. This webinar is part of that commitment to equip students with the tools to think critically, to act with moral clarity, and to participate responsibly in global conversations. The ongoing genocide in Palestine and the silence or complicity of international institutions demands that we confront difficult questions and take principled stances. That is why we felt this discussion was so important for our community.
We are honored to be joined by two highly respected voices in this struggle, Ms. Fatima Bhutto, an acclaimed writer, activist, and public intellectual whose work has consistently challenged systems of power and injustice. Ms. Sawsan Dalaq, a Palestinian activist, educator, and advocate who has been at the forefront of amplifying Palestinian voices and building international solidarity as well. Together, they will help us explore today's theme: how institutional complicity sustains violence, what the failures of the global order reveal, and most importantly, how we can rethink our own roles in building solidarity and resisting silence. Also, if you both feel like sharing anything at all from your side, you are most welcome to, and we would be honored to hear anything at all.
The first theme of this webinar is complicity and responsibility. Over the past months, we've seen how Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank have only grown more extreme, with higher civilian casualties, systematic destruction, and deepening humanitarian crises. Yet, despite the escalation, protests that once drew massive global crowds seem to be slowing down. Beyond power, there's also the question of accountability. Governments, institutions, and even individuals face a choice: to remain complicit through silence or to take responsibility in confronting injustice. This tension between complicity and responsibility is central to how the genocide in Gaza is enabled or resisted. What are your thoughts on complicity and responsibility? And to ask the first specific question, everybody agrees that we owe a duty to the people of Palestine, but solidarity overall is a loaded term. What does it mean to stand in solidarity? If I recognize that Israel is the clear oppressor, but I don't participate in protests, I don't boycott BDS brands, can I still say that I stand in solidarity?
I'm happy to go after, if Sawsan would like to start.
Hello, assalamu alaikum. There are so many of you, and I'm nervous. Thank you so much for your time. And yes, I think you can be. You have to do what you can in every way possible. But the more you do, the better. You can't sit at home. To me, saying a prayer every night before you go to sleep for the people in Gaza and Palestine during the war, that's something. That's a start. It's better than nothing. Feeling and noticing and following the news is something. I think the biggest problem for so many generations is that so many people were deaf and mute and just didn't care. They didn't listen enough. They didn't follow the news, and that's why what happened after October 7th was such a shock to everyone, because no one knew how bad it was. So as a first step, you need to follow the news, understand what's happening, reading, that not going on protests and not boycotting does not make you complicit, but it makes you silent, and eventually you will feel the effects of that. And we'll talk more about that during our talk. I'm sure there will be more of an opportunity to elaborate on that. I don't want to make people feel guilty, but you start by educating yourself, saying a prayer, and then you take it up a level and maybe go on a protest, maybe write something, maybe follow people and make the algorithms on social media amplify those voices. That's something. That's better than nothing. It's just a start. That's a form of actually protesting and making a noise. And then you can boycott. You can do more. You can stop talking yourself. So you build up, but don't go into the guilt of I'm not doing anything. Start small and make it bigger and bigger.
If I can add to what Sawsan said, I think there are a couple of very important things about the question. As Sawsan said, silence is complicity. So one does have a duty to speak up. What do we know about complicity? Well, we know that apartheid South Africa began to fall when the ties of complicity were broken. So people were protesting against apartheid South Africa. It wasn't enough. It was very important, but it was not enough. And what do we mean by ties of complicity? It means that when you are shopping, when you are a consumer, you are giving your money to companies that are actively participating in the genocide. So Coca-Cola, for example, is a BDS target. Zara, the clothes store, is a BDS target. Puma is a BDS target. And if you as a consumer say, I'm not going to buy Coca-Cola. I used to buy a Coke every day at lunchtime. I'm now not going to buy it. And if all of you do that, I mean, I'm looking at all the different campuses. Imagine if the Johar Town Girls Group 2, Gulberg campus, Gujranwala campus, imagine if all of you just didn't buy Coca-Cola anymore. That would have a massive effect. And Coca-Cola sales would drop. And at the end, Coca-Cola shareholders would say, why are we losing money? Because we are invested in Israel. This is not worth it for us. And they would break their connection, their investments with Israel. That would have a significant impact. So boycotting is, I think, essential. And it's important to think of it as people's power. So that's a massive thing you can do as solidarity. Does it hurt you? Maybe you have to think of drinking something besides Coca-Cola. Maybe you have to buy a different pair of shoes besides Puma. But is that hurtful for you? No. Is it hurtful for Israel? Yes. And so I think it's very important right now to understand that what happens in Gaza, what happens in Palestine is not going to be confined there. If it succeeds there, it will come for all of our countries next. If Israel is allowed to bomb schools and get away with it, if they're allowed to kill doctors and get away with it, if they're allowed to murder journalists and get away with it, if they're allowed to starve children and get away with it, make no mistake, they will do it to other countries. They will do it in the rest of the Middle East. They will do it to Iran. And guess who shares a border with Iran? We do. And they will come for us next. So I think we have a duty, and you have a duty as young people, to participate in this as though it is happening to you. Because what happens in Palestine can be easily replicated anywhere else in the world.
Thank you, Ms. Fatma. As a follow-up question, what we noticed in the recent years and since the genocide has commenced, that a lot of people have fizzled out in their advocacy. And a primary reason that they give is that many people surrounding them, their peers, their families, are already aware of the genocide. My social circle is limited to these people who are already aware of what is happening in Gaza. Why do I, as a person, still have a responsibility to continue advocating, to continue raising my voice? Ms. Fatma, if you would like to go first.
Well, for the reasons that I just said, you have a responsibility because, when we're watching what's happening, we have to watch it as a body. And it matters to us not because we're Muslims. It matters to us because we're humans. That has to be a very important distinction here. I think that if we see the world as a connected world, then we understand that what happens there can happen to us. Look at the issue of climate change, for example. Climate change is not something that's happening to another country and the rest of the world is safe. Climate change is going to impact the world. Israel's genocide is going to impact the world. And I'll give you one specific example of how it's already impacting the world. Look at the floods right now, the devastating floods in KPK. Look at the rains in Karachi. There is a significant climate disruption because of the amount of CO2 that 21 months of Israeli bombardment have led into the air. So the environmental damage of Israel's bombs, they've dropped, the equivalent of 6 Hiroshimas on Gaza. And Hiroshima, as you know, was a nuclear bomb, was attacked by a nuclear bomb, right? So the amount of bombardment is environmentally very dangerous, not just for Gaza, but for the world. Look at the floods we're facing right now. Yes, some of it's corruption. Some of it is lack of management. A lot of it is corruption and lack of management. But have you noticed that monsoon season is getting worse and worse and worse? This is worse than 2022. This is what they're saying already, right? That is connected to Israeli bombardment. Did you remember last year? I don't know if you remember November of 2024, there were very bad flooding in Spain, a country that doesn't have the corruption of Pakistan. But Valencia, a city in Spain, was inundated with rain. Houses were destroyed, cars were destroyed. And why did that happen to a city that doesn't have torrential rain? That's environmental damage caused by many factors, including Israel's bombardment. So you do have a responsibility, and it doesn't matter whether your family agrees with you and your whole social circle agrees. You're lucky. You're lucky to live in an environment where people care about genocide. Many people do not care. And as such, it's our continued responsibility to raise our voices and to insist to the end, not just of genocide, but of Israel's occupation, Israel's apartheid, and the suppression of Palestinian people.
Thank you, Ms. Fatma. Ms. Sawsan, would you have anything to add?
I have a lot to add. Well, thank you, Fatima, because you summed it up pretty well. I'll add from another perspective. I'll add the perspective of a Palestinian who has lived with an identity crisis all her life. When I left university, I dreamt of working for the United Nations, thinking that that's a place that will allow me to fight for people's rights and fight for justice. The war in Gaza showed us all, I think, that these institutions are fake institutions, that these are systems that have been built to support, and I'm not just talking about Zionism, it's the bigger thing, the global thing happening, to support Zionism and its existence, because they go to the Security Council and they pass resolutions that are never implemented. Everyone turns a blind eye. We're not talking about something that has been happening since October 7th, since the war in Gaza started. We're talking about something that has been happening since 1948 and even before. They have built a system to support the Zionism system, and for us Palestinians, that injustice has been taking place for so long. Before going to university, I wanted to be a journalist, and now I realize that media institutions are just so complicit that they exist actually in the West to support Zionism growing and existing and ensuring that people turn a blind eye to what's happening in Palestine. Now, if that could happen in Palestine, imagine, as Fatima said before, eventually it's gonna come closer and closer to where we are, where you are, to where everyone is. It's just we have been muted for so long as human beings. We have made to feel, oh, it's okay. There are organizations handling these wars. There are organizations doing this and that. The media, BBC only reports on certain things when it feels it can report on them. And I grew up respecting the BBC so much. My parents would only believe anything that was aired on the BBC because that was supposed to be the trustworthy media institution. But this war has showed us, it unraveled so many things. It showed us that these institutions have existed to protect Zionism for so long and growing and growing and growing. And the only reason people are waking up now is because the Gazans are so brave and they're reporting and they're filming their own deaths and their own starvation for the world to see. And that's what woke everyone up. But the fact that that's happening to Palestinians and to Gazans in specific right now and the West Bank does not mean that it will not happen to everyone else, sorry, I'm taking too long, but if I may share one slide with you and just to show you your role in everything. You see my slide now?
Mhm.
Going back to what Fatima was saying, when you eat a Kit Kat, and I specifically chose something that not everyone is thinking about, and not everyone is, thinking about boycotting Nestle, for example. Now, Kit Kat and to be honest, until 2 years ago, it was one of my favorite chocolates. Um, a Kit Kat is manufactured by Nestle. Nestle makes a profit of 101 billion USD annually. Now, what does Kit Kat do? Okay, it's not cooperating. Now, first thing about Nestle is that it was discovered that Nestle makes sure that they sell second-grade products. Now, what I mean by that, the baby formula, they add sugar to it for babies so that babies grow up dependent on sugar. And you can imagine all the rest of the health issues. Now, that same baby formula does not get sold in, say, Switzerland, Spain, Britain, wherever. Nestle invests in an a company called Osam, and it has a huge R&D center in Israel. So, yeah, all good. They have the right to do that, whatever. Now, parallel to that, there's a company called BlackRock, and they invest in other companies. They invest in Nestle. And BlackRock, and I try to simplify this for everyone as much as possible. BlackRock also invests in arms companies like Lockheed Martin. And 70% of sales from Lockheed are by the US State Department. And what does that do? They get donated the arms or sold to Israel, and that ends up contributing to the genocide in Gaza. If not, then they are used by countries to create wars everywhere else in the world. They want you to be scared of India. They want you to be scared of Iran. They want you to be scared of everyone. Because why? Because your government will go and buy more arms. So this is the vicious circle we're living in. Capitalism, colonialism, everything coming together. It's not just about Gaza and Palestine. I'll stop sharing now. I hope the concept came across easily. So it's about everyone. It's that Kit Kat you eat and enjoy, and how that contributes to arms being used in Gaza. So just like Fatima used the example of the global warming, everything happening in the world is part of a bigger system. And I don't want you to, because you're so old, you're so young, and you might think, oh, I'm living in a world where it's all conspiracies and everything. No, they're scared of you. They're scared of you. You are the biggest threat. When you boycott, when you are aware of what's happening in the world, then you are the threat. So don't feel undermined, feel empowered. Thank you. Sorry that took so long.
No worries. I think it's great that it took long because this insight was wonderful. The next question we have is that social media has been instrumental in documenting the genocide in visceral detail. But with this constant exposure, many people feel triggered and burnt out. And as a result, avoid talking about the genocide. How do you find the strength to keep going after seeing a kid plead for food and finding out that they were being murdered, that they were murdered the following day? What advice would you give to those of us struggling to stay engaged? Ms. Sawsan, you can go first for this question.
Well, that's tough because that is the question that I was dreading all morning. I've been very emotional, and I know it's very hard. It's really hard to keep going, but it's just one, you remember the suffering of the people in Gaza and what they're going through. I'm sorry, this is the part that where I tear up and I start to get emotional. So we don't have an excuse to say we're tired. We're overloaded with seeing dead bodies and dead children and starving people. We don't get that right. I'm sitting now in an air-conditioned room. I have plenty of food to eat, and I spend time with my children. So I count my blessings and I keep going. I count my blessings and I pray. I boycott. I do whatever I can to just keep going. And I know it's so terribly hard, but when you start believing in your core, in your heart, that this is an issue about the human race and not just Gazans and Palestinians, you will you will realize that it's about the power that you have, and that you can be a power for change, and that keeps you going. But sometimes you just need to take a break, breathe, and go back again to supporting, doing whatever you can, amplifying the voices, reading, anything. But it is hard and it is very emotional.
Absolutely. Ms. Fatma, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, as Sawsan mentioned, it's something we all struggle with. I struggle with it a lot. I wake up every morning, and when I look at my phone, I'm seeing images of violence that we are not equipped to see. We are the first generation who has watched a Holocaust in real time. You know, not only because we have access to information, but because the perpetrators, because Israel is filming their crimes. They are proud of their crimes. They're sharing them. All the other genocidaires in history hid their crimes. These are the first ones to share them. And it's devastating for the human spirit. It's devastating for the human mind and the human heart. But I'll just share with you what a Palestinian writer called Raja Shehada said to me. I taught a class about Palestinian literature, and he was a guest speaker. And that was a question that came up a lot. And he said two things. He said, number one, we don't have the luxury of despair. We are not living through what the Palestinians are living through. We are not living through the unbearable suffering of the Palestinian people. So we don't have the right to give up. Of course, we get tired, and of course, we feel burnt out. But Rajat said that it is an honor to be part of the Palestinian struggle. And when you feel tired, that's what you remember. And, that's what I have to remind myself all the time, that it's an honor to be part of the Palestinian struggle, to watch these men and women and children stand up against the entire world. So the least we can do is stand with them.
Thank you so much for giving us the courage to keep going with our advocacy and keep talking about Gaza as well. As we move forward, I think it's important to recognize that what we see and hear about Palestine doesn't exist in a vacuum. Narratives are shaped, controlled, and reinforced by powerful structures, from lobbying groups to state interests, that dictate whose voices are amplified and whose are silenced. Let's turn to the question of power. Who controls the story and why does it matter? My first question for you, and I think this is very important because I think the vast majority of us, even sitting in this room, are constantly thinking, why does the Muslim community remain silent, and why have they not helped tangibly the people of Palestine? So maybe in the form of sufficient aid or sufficient political pressure. What is causing them to remain silent and perhaps complicit even?
How much time do you guys have? I mean, if I can just answer this briefly, I'll hand over to Sawsan. When you look at history, again, we have to see everything is connected. Nothing happens in a vacuum. There's a reason that the strong and independent leaders of the Muslim world and the Arab world or the Asian world, and let's even extend it, let's also say the global South. So let's include Latin America, let's include Africa. There's a reason that those leaders were killed. And they were replaced with people who were in the service of empire, in the service of imperialism, either because they were indebted to them, to their financial institutions, to their weapons industry, to their aid complex. During the Yom Kippur War, what is called the Yom Kippur War, Pakistan at that time was led by my grandfather, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and he sent Pakistan's Air Force to the aid of the Palestinians. Now, he did that quietly, but the Israelis knew he had done it. And one of the stories that comes from that period is that and our Air Force is the strongest, one of the strongest parts of our army. So to send our Air Force is a commitment. It's not just a symbol or a gesture. It was really sending the strength of the Pakistani military to help the Palestinians. And the Israelis, when they were dogfighting in the air with our pilots, used to come on the radio and say, "Go home, go back to Pakistan." So what happened? Obviously, we know what happened to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and we know what kind of leaders have come since. It's not enough to send aid. Aid is not enough. Number one, because Israel is not letting aid in. Right now, a military force is required to stop Israel. Look at Ukraine and Russia. Within days of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the entire Western world mobilized weaponry, diplomacy, sanctions to come to the aid of Ukraine. Why have no Muslim countries done the same for Palestine? It's an important question. And then you look at who is in power in the Muslim world. They are all contractors of America. They're all contractors of empire. They're not free leaders. And this is why politics is so important. This is why you cannot afford to say, "Oh, I don't really care about politics," or, "I just like who my parents tell me to like." These are all of our leaders, and they have failed not just us, they've failed the world.
Ms. Sawsan, if you could go next, please.
Now I'll put my Jordanian hat on. And Jordan is next. It's as simple as that. Netanyahu, very well, we knew that before, but Netanyahu announced his plans for Greater Israel just a few days ago. And he plans to extend, not him, just the whole Zionist institution towards a Greater Israel. So Palestine is not enough. And part of the system of creating Israel, the state of Israel as we know it now, was they were very smart about it. As I said before, they did not just create Israel and, Israel just invades Palestine, takes over, and all of that. There were media systems put in place, the United Nations, complicity everywhere, the states supporting that, and everything was like just set up. They're like big pillars to support the bigger institution of Zionism. So part of that is the complicity of the Muslim and Arab world by weakening our states, making sure that we are worried about the wrong things, that our youth, you guys, want to flee and go work in the West and dream of living in Britain, the US, because there are not enough opportunities and everything in your country. So you think, "Oh, I want to leave. This is not good enough. I cannot do anything here." That is part of the system. They don't want you. They don't want us to love our countries. They don't want us to to work to better ourselves, and that goes to all the levels, all the way to the leaders. So we're weak from the core, but we're not at the same time. So when you decide to buy a Pakistani Kit Kat, you are supporting the Pakistani industry. You are supporting your own economy, and you are supporting, and you stop complaining about the corruption, and you change things in your own country, one bit at a time, one little step at a time, by not eating a Kit Kat, and you eat the alternative Pakistani brand, whatever that is. You change that. So it's as Fatima said, the blockage, it takes a war, and we're not capable of war. It's part of the system that we're not capable of a war with Israel.
But I would add to what Sawsan is saying that, again, you all are too young to remember this, but in the 1970s, OPEC basically the oil producing countries, which are largely Arab countries, basically tried this. They tried to withhold oil. They tried to change oil prices as a pressure point. It didn't work, but it did show power. It did show the possibility of a united bloc, what it could do. Certainly, those countries that tried to participate paid a price. But it's not that we are powerless. We have plenty of power, combined. I mean, just look at Pakistan. Pakistan is 250 almost million people. Put Pakistan and Bangladesh together, we're like 500 million people. Put Pakistan, Bangladesh, Iran. Now we're almost at 1 billion. How is it that we don't have the power to confront a country of nothing, of 9 million settlers? And the reason is, again, that we're not just confronting 9 million, we're confronting all of the Western world. We're confronting Canada, the US, all of Europe. And we have to build our own bloc. We have to build our own bloc so we're not diminished.
Thank you, Ms. Fatma. And as you mentioned about the complicity of the Western world, I have a question. What went wrong in this narrative that we see children being murdered, we see children pleading for their lives, and the Western world hails this? What went wrong in this world that the murder of a child is viewed as a necessary, that every Palestinian is viewed as a terrorist in the Western eyes? Ms. Sawsan, if you would like to go first.
Yeah, I grew up since I was a child. I'm 53 now. Brought up with the mentality that we have to be nice Palestinians, that we have to prove to the world whenever we meet people, whenever we travel outside, our Arab countries, that we are not anti-Semites, that we are nice people, we are not terrorists. And that's the narrative, because again, the propaganda for so long was that all Arabs, all Palestinians specifically, are terrorists who are out to get all Jews, and the Jews suffered the Holocaust, and Palestinians want to deprive them of safety and land. And so it was a narrative that was created a very long time ago. And I think personally is what's happening now is not what went wrong, it's what's starting to become right. It's Gaza waking up the world. And yes, we're seeing that. And as awful as that is, but it's actually finally changing the narrative. It's thanks to these brave people and their fight that we're finally hearing a new narrative, that people are going out of their way, that the people in the West don't mind getting arrested to fight against that narrative. So what went wrong? It's the system that has been created a very long time ago, and there's finally a change. I don't know how long it will take for justice to be achieved, but it's starting.
Ms. Fatma, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I think we should distinguish between people and governments. I think, we've all seen the protests across the West have been really important. We've seen young people get thrown out of university. We've seen grandparents get arrested. So that's very important. People are not their governments. But on the other hand, the West, this is not an accident. Nothing went wrong. It's by design. It's a racist system. And this racist system is designed on exploiting our countries for resources. And the only way you can do that is if you don't see us as deserving of our own resources. So the West is a fundamentally racist concept. And I say this as someone who has studied in the West, was educated by the West, lived in the West. They don't see us as enjoying what they feel they are entitled and deserve. So it's time that we start understanding this and start trying to be self-sufficient rather than depending on them for everything, depending on them for education, depending on them for culture, depending on them for... they're not worthy of it. How can you respect a civilization, so-called, that has allowed children to be massacred for 21 months straight? It's not worthy of respect.
One question that really does bug me is why and how have 9 million settlers made the entire Western world defy the same principles they have championed historically in a way that we've never seen before?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and this is something we've seen again and again, that what does Israel have on the world? Um, and it's something that I think is not going to be one answer, it's a number of answers. But I think if we understand Israel as an outpost of the Western world, it becomes a lot clearer. Israel is America and the West's thorn in our part of the world. It is not an ally of the West. It is the West. It enjoys an impunity that no one else in the world enjoys. It enjoys aid that no one else enjoys. I mean, there's the amount of money that goes into Israel. Israelis don't pay for anything. Everything is subsidized because of all the American aid that goes there. And I think this only makes sense if you see them as an outpost of America. Look at the damage they have caused to the Middle East. Look at the damage they've caused to Arab countries. I think that's why they're there by design. And I think we also have to remember something very important, that all the violence that was done to the Jewish people over the centuries was not done by Muslims. None of it. It was not done by Asian countries. It was done by Western countries. World War II, that is an entirely Western conflict. All the pogroms that happened against Jews, that is a Western violence. It has nothing to do with our part of the world. So we are paying for the West's crimes. It's very confusing. And then the larger problem as well is that they play a very important role in surveillance technology and weapons. And the West essentially betrays its own laws by using Israeli surveillance technology. So they're breaking laws and they're breaking protocol on every possible point in dealing with Israel in the way that they have dealt with them.
Ms. Sawsan, would you have anything to add?
No, actually, Fatima put it really well. It sums it up perfectly. It is a reflection of the Western system of colonialism and capitalism and everything put in one. And yeah, there are 9 million settlers that represent all the Western world.
Thank you for that. My next question then is, Ms. Fatma, you mentioned that whenever you raise a voice, you get murdered. If I am a 17-year-old and I watch leaders being murdered, I watch people more capable than me being silenced, what as a person do I have what hope do I have to keep fighting? And when I compare myself to historical movements, such as the civil rights movement, such as the African apartheid, how do I as a person manage to gain the strength to keep going on? And what strength do I have?
That's a very good question. And in fact, they want us to feel, as Sawsan said earlier, they want us to feel afraid. They want us to feel panicked. They want us to feel uncomfortable. Look at all the celebrities we know. Look at all the footballers and the athletes and the Hollywood stars and the musicians and people with millions and millions of money and all the security in the world. Let me be specific here. Look at Shah Rukh Khan, for example, the biggest Muslim star that any of us could possibly name. Shah Rukh Khan has not said anything. Okay, he's a Muslim, fine. Let's leave aside Muslim. He's an Asian. Okay, let's leave aside Asian. He's a human being, like I said. These celebrities, these stars, these athletes, their cowardice is meant to make us feel afraid. But let's look at who's not afraid. Look at those people being arrested, like we just said. Look at those young people who have been thrown out of their universities. Look at those young people who are going to jail. Look at those young people who have been fired from their jobs. And these are not people with the money of Shah Rukh Khan. These are not people with the finances or the stability of Shah Rukh Khan. These are people who are very vulnerable. And yet they have been more brave. I think that that's the example we should look at, is that actually we have a huge amount of power. If you remember Sawsan's slide, your power is in every choice that you make. When you choose not to buy the Kit Kat, when you choose not to buy Zara, when you choose not to buy Coca-Cola, collectively, we are making a massive difference, massive, right? When you say, you know what, Shah Rukh Khan, I'm not watching your movie. Or you say, you know what, Taylor Swift, I'm not listening to you on Spotify. The second is you have to say why, right? If Taylor Swift sees that, oh my God, I used to have 10 million monthly listeners and now I have 2 million monthly listeners, and they're all saying it's because of Gaza, Taylor Swift is going to say something about Gaza, you know? It's the same argument of Pepsi and Nestle. If they start to lose sales, McDonald's, look at McDonald's. If they start to lose sales, they're going to say, is it worth it for us to be allied with this? And that's a role that we all play. You have to remember here that we are in a time that we have never seen before, but we will protect each other. We will take care of each other. That's what community is about, is that we do this together. Alone, it's impossible. But if we're all together, there is safety in numbers and there is power in numbers. The last thing I would say is that you must never do anything that you're not prepared to. You know, of course, it is frightening. And even BDS says, if you're going to lose your job, please don't do it, because we want you to be secure. We want you to be able and stable. Do what you're able to. If you're able to do it, then please know that there's a community of people around you who will join you. But I think the more of us that join, the more of us that insist, the more of us that don't feel afraid because we have each other, the faster the impact will be and the more powerful.
Thank you, Ms. Fatma. Ms. Sawsan, would you like to add something?
Yes, I think what you are going through now is what we've been going through as Palestinians for years, is that we've been feeling helpless, guilty a bit, and we've had all this shame for so long. And because we didn't know what to do. I think it's like it's so clear now what we can do. They're scared of the numbers. They're worried about the numbers. Yes, they don't want to lose your purchase power. They don't want to lose your support in other areas. So um, I think when let's look at it like a huge tower that's being built. If you look at the tower at the end and you say, "Oh my God, how did they build this tower? It's so huge." Um, but if you remember that the tower took, it was built in layers and layers to simplify it. It didn't become a tower overnight. There's no magic wand. And the layers are us, the people. We just build one layer at a time, one bit at a time. We don't have to go right to the top and think if a leader can get killed, then what can I do? Don't feel helpless. There's always something you can do. Um, and that's going back to your first question that we started with, that it's using feeling helpless and scared, and that's when you become complicit. And this is where it all comes together. It's very easy there. And I know this because that's how us Palestinians in the diaspora have been feeling for years and years and years. So, but now it's just spreading more and more all over the world. And I warn you, it's that feeling of I'm nothing. I cannot make a difference. Um, w w and it's like, and there are all these critics who say, "Oh, so you're both boycotting this or that, but can you boycott Microsoft? Can you boycott Apple?" And they make you feel even more helpless because there are the big companies that you can't boycott, or Instagram or whatever. And there are ways, you just start small and build up. And then if all of you remember the numbers that Fatima mentioned about the number of populations, that if they all came together, imagine what a difference that would make. So yeah, we all have voices and we can, do one thing at a time to build the layers of that tower.
Absolutely. Collectivizing is definitely the way to go to solve this issue at large. To talk more about social media, because I think all of us students at least primarily interact with this issue on social media. Does social media solidarity become performative at times, reduced to just hashtags and temporary outrage?
well, even if they are, we need them. One of the best things I read about social media and whether we need to boycott it or not is that um, Instagram, which used to be a shallow thing where people just post their selfies and food and photos of their food and their outings, is now a battleground. It is actually where the real battle is happening, and so is X/Twitter, Facebook, whatever social media you want to. It's not just performative; it's amplifying voices. It's tricking the algorithms when you like, when you post, when you retweet, when you do all of these things, you are amplifying voices and tricking the algorithm and making our voices heard, making the voices of Gazans and what's happening there heard. So in some cases it can get performative, but that shouldn't be an excuse for not using it. If you keep reminding yourself, yes, it is a battleground. And I'm going to link it here quickly with the boycott issue and what I mentioned earlier. Can I boycott Instagram? Well, don't engage with the paid ads and everything. That's a way, because that's how they make money. So that's a way you can boycott while using Instagram. So you can make it less profitable for them. But the most important thing is use these platforms uh, to amplify the voices and make sure that there are so many people who have in the West who have said, even in Israel themselves, some Israelis are saying that. A lot of them are saying, we didn't know this was all happening. We didn't know we were part of this. We did not know that we were supporting the system. So social media helped Palestinians raise their voice and make themselves heard.
Ms. Fatma, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I used to be very critical of social media, and I think social media has played an incredibly important role, especially when we see how complicit the media is. Sawsan mentioned BBC earlier. BBC has been really abysmal. They call it Bibi, like as in Bibi Netanyahu, the BBC, or they call it Bibi Says now. The same is true for the New York Times, which is now called the New York Crimes. I used to subscribe to the New York Times. I've unsubscribed for this reason that legacy media is not only complicit, they are propagandists. When they say a 5-year-old young woman instead of a 5-year-old child, when they end every sentence with, but Israel denies it, it doesn't matter what Israel denies. Look at the facts. If I punch you in the face and I'm caught on video and then I say, oh, I didn't do it, do you print that I didn't do it or that there's video of me punching you? Obviously, the facts. So legacy media has absolutely been shattered. The myth of objective reporting has been shattered. And as such, social media has become very important because those Palestinian journalists, those incredibly brave men and women who have been hunted down and killed, were using social media to share what was happening. We mustn't boycott social media. That's what they want us to do because that's where we're seeing their crimes. And we should also be aware of the total censorship on things like Instagram. I get censored all the time on Instagram. I get censored all the time on Twitter. They've just put a head of content management on TikTok who is a former Israeli soldier. They're trying to infiltrate those spaces the same way they did with legacy media. So we have to fight against that. But I also think it's quite important. You're all young people. I have so much faith in the youth globally. I have no faith in almost anything else, not in governments. But a lot of you are coders, I'm sure. A lot of you are computer scientists. Think of these things, think of the future, build new platforms. We need a platform where we're not going to be censored by former Israeli soldiers. And they don't exist. So we'll have to build them.
Absolutely. Just as a follow-up to the social media question, if at yes, we'll get to them in just a bit. If advocacy at face value, whether it is performative or genuine, is just the same, apparently, what is the significance about genuine advocacy? And how do you see the difference between the two if they just seem the same in front of other people?
I don't know, actually. This is a tough question. Uh, for me, a very simple person, I think accept all advocacy. We just need it all. And like all evil, like all bad things, uh, performative advocacy will filter itself out, and you will discover with time, us as the users, as the consumers of all of this, will discover over time that this is um, performative advocacy. Uh, I don't think it lasts. I think what's happening now is true advocacy, and it's happening. I think it's genuine, to be honest. I personally haven't come across performative advocacy. I don't know how much of it is there. I feel quite ignorant now. Fatma, maybe you can add to this.
I think what you said, Sawsan, is really important. It filters itself out because if
Mm.
it's not genuine, it it doesn't have the weight to sustain. And I'm guessing what you mean by performative is people who will kind of just to fit in the crowd say, "Oh yeah, I'm against," but they're not willing to protest, they're not willing to boycott, they just want to be part of something. I do agree with you, Sausan, that I think the world is enraged as they should be. The world is standing so much with Palestinians, and I do think the people who are not genuine really will just cancel themselves out. I agree with you.
Thank you so much. So we have one last question from us moderators, and then we'll move on to the audience. And this is for Ms. Sawsan Dalaq specifically. I was reading this book by Mahmoud Mamdani, and I read how often another form of colonialism is defining the solution that we as outsiders think is appropriate for another society. I think this is what the British also did when they were defining solutions for us as the subcontinent when they colonized us. Moving on to the conclusion of this webinar, I want to understand, how do Palestinian voices define solidarity themselves? And how can we as outsiders avoid imposing our biased own frameworks onto Palestinians?
Oh, that is so thoughtful, so nice. But you've been colonized. You know how bad it is. You are still being colonized in different forms. So yeah, just keep advocating. Honestly, it's we need to take the best out of the West. So like Fatima mentioned, we've all been both of us have been educated in the West. But we learn to think, and we think for ourselves, and we filter along the way. So your solidarity with us Palestinians is actually to us is you standing up for yourselves as well. You fighting colonialism, you fighting propaganda, you thinking for yourselves, and you analyzing on your own. You will come to your own conclusions, and you will be advocates for Palestine along the way. It's just a natural byproduct. So you will never be offensive, I promise you.
Thank you so much for your time and your answers. We would now, however, ask you to give us 15 additional minutes, as we would request the audience, if they have any particular questions, to please raise their hand.
Okay, as Miss Fatma mentioned, that the current rulers of the Muslim world are कहते हैं are slaves of the Zionists and Israeli institutions, and currently our country is also being run on the loans given to us by Zionist and Israeli institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. So, like as a person who is trying his best to boycott, I do sometimes feel quite disheartened that even if I do boycott, the taxes will be used to pay off the debts to those Zionist and Israeli institutions, which will eventually end up with Israel. So I do feel like I'm not making any difference as compared to if I do boycott or I do not.
If I can jump in to say, you really do make a difference when you boycott. We know that for a fact. We know it makes a big difference. And why do we know that? Because Israel has lobbied for the last 15 years since the BDS movement was founded. It's lobbied to make boycotting a crime. So in America, anti-boycott laws have been passed in many states. And the template they use essentially is that if you are found to be if a state doesn't ban boycotting, they lose access to federal funds for emergencies, for example. We saw there were floods in Texas recently, okay, like a couple months ago. And there were towns that hadn't signed on to the anti-boycott pledge, and they did not get flood relief money from their government. So we know that boycotting makes a difference. We know that because they're trying to ban it. So please trust me when I tell you your boycott does make a difference. And as you just said, I feel disheartened that my money goes towards these things. Well, don't give your money to them then. The IMF is an institution designed to strangle countries and to make them dependent. And what that means for us is that we have to be a self-sufficient nation. We have to be an economically stable nation. That's not going to happen overnight. It is going to be a difficult process. It does mean we have to come up with different rulers. And if you don't find rulers that you like, find new ones. And if you don't find new ones, become one. This is the only way that things can change. But one day, the goal is that we will not be at their mercy, that we will be sufficient enough, but we can't be sufficient enough if there's corruption everywhere.
May I please add, I will share with you what happened in Jordan after the war started. Before the war started, there were so many Jordanian industries that were so obscure, like home cleaning detergents. I don't know if you know that Tide and Persil and Ariel, which are what we wash our clothes with. Actually, we're donating free laundry washing machines with their own products to the soldiers, so that they can help them wash their clothes. So they were supporting them in such an unconventional way, an awful way, to be honest. Like, we support you, we'll help you wash your uniforms that you use to kill children and babies in Gaza. So we were scrambling. There were so many things that we wanted to boycott, and we didn't know what. And then we started turning inward and looking at our own Jordanian industries. We used to look down on them because we used to think, oh, look at the packaging, it's so uncool, and it doesn't live up to the packaging of the Dettol or smell like it, or these products that we grew up using them. Coke and Pepsi, all of these products, we just, we only believed in the Western products as the better quality products. But when the war started and we needed to boycott, really, just there was no choice. We either boycott or become complicit. So we started buying Jordanian products. And guess what? There was a growth in our economy by 2.5% during a war. Jordan is the most affected country of the war. There's, of course, Gaza and Palestine. But then Jordan comes very close after that, because we're just the next door neighbors, and everything that happens there affects us here. So despite the war taking place, Jordanian economy, and Jordan is a very poor country that never has growth. Our economy grew by 2.5% last year. No one celebrated that or talked about it because they don't want to admit that this is a direct result of the boycott, because we were buying Jordanian products. Our industries improved. And guess what? The packaging that we were looking down upon, these companies, because they were starting to make money finally, they improved their products, they became better quality, the packaging became better, and now they're competing. I'm not supposed to advocate soda drinks to you guys, but the Jordanian soda drink is just amazing. We never buy anything else now. So give it a shot. Grow your own economy by buying local products, even if the quality is not so good at the beginning, and it will become better when you support your own industries. Your economy will become better, and you will start, and you will start, your money will not go to the World Bank and all the institutions that you mentioned. It would get better with time, but you have to start somewhere. So actually, boycotting not only hurts the Zionist institution, it also helps your country become a more industrial country and become you and you will have growth in your own country. I don't know if that summed it up for you.
So my question is, how does this genocide compare to the others we have seen in history, and what steps can we take on an individual level to stop this and further prevent more genocides?
Fatima, you go.
Okay. Well, I think a very big difference is the fact that other genocides in history have been done in darkness. Whether we're looking at what was done to the Armenians, whether we're looking at what was done in Rwanda or Bosnia, the perpetrators of the genocide tried to hide what they were doing. I mean, certainly the rhetoric was the same and all that, but they weren't filming it and uploading it to their Facebook at the same moment. So that is a huge, huge difference, and one cannot overstate how important that is. People always say, "What would you have done if you lived during the Nazis?" Well, if you had, um, if you wanted to compare it to today, it's what you are doing today. Except the Nazis were not broadcasting every morning, noon, and night what they were doing. They were hiding it. The Nazis put their concentration camps far away. So they were not in the center of the city. So people couldn't see, couldn't smell, couldn't understand what was going on. The Israelis are totally, totally flagrant about what they're doing. They're almost boasting, At the same time, what is similar? Well, what is similar is that they have planned this. Genocides don't happen accidentally. They're designed. So one of the most important things to know is that the Israelis have been counting the calories that go into Gaza for the last 20 years or so. And they've been calculating exactly how many calories do people need to live and not die, but to starve. That's by design. The murdering of journalists is by design. The killing of doctors is by design. The Lemkin Institute, which is the institute whose founder, Philip Lemkin, coined the word genocide. The Lemkin Institute has told us that what Israel is doing is a genocide. I would go further and say it's a Holocaust. But it is very unusual what Israel is doing, and it has broken the mold of what came before. And the world will be broken in many ways after this. Media is broken. Our belief in certain values is broken. Our belief in the West is broken. Our belief in our own governments is broken. So I think the world we're going to see post genocide is going to be a really fractured one.
My question is for Ms. Fatma. You said that we can see Israel as an extension of US. So I wanted to note that we have recently seen a change in policy in US to eliminate the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, as well as a deportation of immigrants. Do you think that is an effort by them so the US civilians start seeing marginalized communities and Palestinians as separate to themselves so they do not have any humanity or empathy for them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think in some ways, yes, what you're saying is true. I think it's also important in that it's taken the mask of the supposed values of the US. Diversity is not a value that they value. It's essentially confirming to us the fundamental racism that lies underneath the society. And I think this is the value of President Trump, is that President Trump doesn't have the facade that other American leaders have had. He just says it as it is. They're doing the same thing, all these governments. It's just the other presidents were a little more sophisticated and they knew how to hide what they were doing with good language and good PR. Trump doesn't, he just says it. So I think what he's really trying to say is that we don't want you here and we don't consider you to be deserving of the same liberties that we would like to enjoy ourselves. And I think it's important to listen to this message. I went to university in the United States. If I was 18 years old, would I go today? No. Why would you give your money? Why would you give your parents' money to that kind of environment? And I think that you're going to see very quickly the rest of Europe following Trump on this. I mean, already they've started to chuck out diversity. Already we've seen companies back out of environmental pledges, back out of environmental promises. So this is going to be a snowball, essentially. And we would do good to pay attention to what they're telling us.
Thank you.
So my question is to Ms. Sawsan. It's that what would you say to someone? What would you say to someone who has the mindset that in my environment, 100 people are boycotting and I stop boycotting, then 99 people will still be boycotting and my stopping will not make a big difference.
Oh, I would say by you boycotting and making the 100, you will affect that number to become 101 and then 102. We want more, not less. So you would not make much of a difference, but that's what everyone wants you to believe, that you're just one person among millions, billions in the world. So what difference do you make? And that's the whole thing, that they're scared of you guys as consumers. Your money empowers them. So and remember, it's not just you being one person. You are one person who is purchasing several products. So your money is contributing to several products at the same time. So your impact is worth thousands of dollars a year. Add that up and multiply it by 100 people that you're boycotting with, and over again, and it makes a huge difference. And I think those people are just making a sad excuse that, what difference do I make? Because they don't want to sacrifice luxuries and things. They're just making excuses. I think they don't want to give up their Starbucks coffee, their Kit Kats, their Zaras, and it's just a lousy excuse.
My question is, with Benjamin Netanyahu's war crimes shielded by Western silence, Donald Trump's open support, global censorship downplaying the IDF's brutality, and the historic removal of anti-Zionist leaders like Shah Faisal and Mohammad Zafi, which paved the way for today's atrocities, is there any realistic hope that Israel's government will ever be held accountable? Any one of you can answer.
Well, it was very clear. We were told that when the ICC issued the arrest warrants, they were told that the court was not to go after us. It was to go after third world leaders and African dictators. So I think we understand that the way the ICC was set up was to make sure that people like Netanyahu are not held accountable. It's a hammer to be used when it suits them and not when it doesn't. Will he be held accountable? I don't think so, personally. We've seen him, fly through Europe, fly to America. They have a legal obligation to arrest him. He's an internationally wanted war criminal. And they didn't do that. France didn't do that. Italy didn't do that. Greece didn't do that. The US didn't do that. The UK hasn't done that. So I don't believe that he's going to be held accountable. I also don't believe that he is different than any other Israeli president. So I think we need to be really careful about saying, oh, Netanyahu is the worst. Netanyahu is like every other Israeli president. This is Israel. He's not an exception. He's the rule of Israel. So if he were to be held accountable, it would mean that they all have to be held accountable. And I don't think the West is capable of doing that. But I hope that I'm wrong.
To end this webinar, I would like to ask both of you, from your experience of advocacy, is there any last message or words of advice you'd want to give to all of us? Ms. Fatma, you can start. We can move on to Ms. Sawsan.
I would just say to you two things. I would say, when you feel burnt out and you feel emotionally shattered by what you're seeing, remember what the Palestinian writer Raja Shehadeh said, that it's an honor to be part of this struggle. And I would also just have a second piece of advice, which is that you must be very proud to be anti-Zionist. You must be very proud to wear your keffiyeh. Don't be afraid, because what you are doing is standing on the right side of history. And you mustn't be intimidated by anyone who tries to tell you not to do those things. We are proud anti-Zionists and we are proud pro-Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fatima.
I would say it's being passive is 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 just a start, and I think it's feeling powerless is a symptom of that whole thing that's happening to us. Is that what can I do? I'm just one person, and I think just keep going, do little things, and I think we tried today to break it down to you to make it feel less daunting. That you don't it doesn't have to be all or nothing. um, you can do little things at a time and start one bit at a time. That's better than not doing anything. So just keep going, keep advocating, and make sure that this never stops. And I think we're seeing the beginning of the end. I don't know how long it will take the end. It could be another 50 years, 100 years. I don't know, but I'm convinced this is the beginning of the end. So stay positive.
Before we started this seminar, Mrs. Rashid told us that this is the seminar of you guys, you, the students. She said so because we are the change. We hosted this webinar not for a conversation to be had in a vacuum and forgotten, but to remind each and every person in this room two things. First and foremost, you are the change. Revolution does not begin with one grand action, but actions taken every single day. Secondly, speak. Speak because they want your silence. Speak because you are the change. Speak so when history is written, our voices are not forgotten. So when history is written, it remembers who was right and who was wrong. And lastly, speak because it is your voice that is the hope in the darkness of this despair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sawsan, for your unwavering dedication and commitment to this cause. From founding the Palestinian Society at university with Ms. Zainab and Ms. Such, to sharing your wisdom here today with us. And the same for you, Ms. Fatma. You're inspiring millions on social media and are continuing to do so. And you've also shared a lot of wisdom here today and have for sure changed a lot of perspectives, not just in this room, but across all LACAS campuses at the very least. On behalf of LACAS A-Level, we would like to thank you both for your time, your wisdom, and your unwavering commitment to justice. This discussion reminded us that education is not confined to classrooms. It is about understanding the world around us, recognizing our responsibilities, and practicing moral clarity in times of crises.
Thank you to all of the students who participated today. We hope with this seminar that you leave with both the critical questions that you require and a renewed conviction to act ethically in your own spheres. Because as Abbas said, if we don't speak, they will. We must stand on the right side of history and we must stand with the people of Gaza. Thank you so much for both of you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.